So hello everybody, so thank you for attending the first webinar of the Grayscott School 2025. So I will briefly introduce the school. If you want more detail, of course, you can refer to the webinar of last week, but this is the first webinar with a topic that will be discussed inside the school. So unit test, philosophy and help on our applications. So first I will briefly introduce the school. So it's a school made in collaboration with CCFR, Centre de compétences in HPC, HPDR, and Quantic for Europe. So with TerraTech, so with Karim Azoum and Maril on Prisma. And so the idea of this school is to have a big high-performance computing school at European scale. So we'll have lots of lectures. So it's a 2-week school from the 23rd of June to the 4th of July 2025. And we'll have 2 weeks, 1 week for the CPU technologies and libraries, and 1 week for the GPU computing and technologies and compiler everything. And you can follow this lecture in 3 modes. So the first one is to attend the school to Annecy, as we did in 2024. So in 2024, it was a school in French, but we'll obviously do it in English for 2025. You can also follow all the lectures which are restreamed live on satellite site. So computing center, basically, which want to teach their colleague, or to teach people around them, or to make some publicity for them to say, okay, we exist, maybe we can work together on some projects, stuff like that. So we had last year 12 satellite sites, so mainly in France, but also in Belgium, in Morocco, and in Senegal, so over 4 countries. And so we have 9 teachers in this school. So you will see one of them here, Sébastien, for unit testing, but not only, of course, it's a school, so everyone is making several lectures in the school. So we have a trailer if you want to have a look. So to summarize everything much better than I just did, if you want to have all the details, all the technology that we will have in the school, so, because the idea is to have a large panel of technology, so you can make your mind if you want to dive in the HPC world, and also if you want to have some expertise on one particular technology, you can follow basically one lecture or one day to go deep into one technology, because of course 12 days maybe it's a bit too much for if you don't have time in your schedule. So the idea is to be helpful for everyone. So if you want to attend the full school, it's okay. If you want to attend one day or several parts, it's okay. Of course, you will miss all the connection between all the lectures, because it's a full school. But yeah, you can do that. And finally, I must forget, if you cannot attend one satellite site or in Annecy, you can follow all the lectures in live on YouTube directly. So we will restream everything on YouTube. So if you want to follow that, okay, yeah. Nice giving you the link in the chat if you want to follow that.
Do you sometimes feel limited by your resources or unsure how to maximize the potential of your HPC resources? Imagine a place where collaboration, creativity, and learning converge with high-performance computing. Welcome to Grayscott School 2025, Europe's leading summer school for HPC. Taking place from June 23rd to July 4th. Over 2 weeks, students, academics, and industry professionals from across Europe will explore the frontiers of programming while building a vibrant community. Together, we'll discuss programming and optimization on heterogeneous architectures, highlighting their respective characteristics and limitations. You'll have a unique opportunity to explore generic optimization methods, as well as the latest technologies and languages for achieving optimal performance. The school is free and open to everyone, and you can participate in person in Annecy, France, with the teachers, at one of our satellite sites in Europe, or online via our live streaming. You can choose from an intensive program or a la carte courses to develop your skills at your own pace. With the first week dedicated on CPU and the second on GPU architectures, you will study computational accuracy, vectorization, parallelization, compilation, memory profiling, unit testing, and the various programming languages C++, Fortran, Rust, Python, and Julia. In addition, we will study the MPI, OpenSHMEM, OpenMP, TBB, EVE, Kiwaku, Cycle, Thirst, CUDA, OpenACC, Vulkan, NumPy, Number, CuPy, CUNumeric, JAX libraries, and Legit, as well as computation with PyTorch and TensorFlow, and the G++, Clang++, NVC++, NV Fortran, G-Fortran, and DPC++ compilers. Throughout the course, you'll discover and use profiling tools such as Valgrind, Perf, Macau, Emsight, Malt, and NumProf. Each session leads to a practical challenge, the simulation of Gray-Scott's diffusion reaction, which tries to describe how a chemical reaction evolves over time. Simple to understand, but complex enough to push the limits of optimization. Thanks to our specially designed Docker containers, you'll have access to a complete working environment to follow courses and exercises on your laptop or supercalculator. Throughout the program, you'll be guided by a dozen expert instructors, leaders in the field of programming and HPC. You'll have the opportunity to ask questions and chat with them live on Discord, so you can tailor your learning to your needs. Join our growing community of over 500 users to find answers, exchange ideas, take on challenges together, and build bonds that will last well beyond the program. You can also join the Gray-Scott School European network of satellite sites, not only to attend the courses, but why not become a satellite site yourself and host the school in your location? You just need to provide a room, a contact person, and access to computing resources. We'll provide courses, tools, and Docker containers for a seamless learning experience. Gray-Scott School is free and open to all. It's your chance to master advanced programming and optimization, engage with a growing European HPC network, and push the boundaries of technology and training. You can kickstart your journey now by joining Gray-Scott Thursdays, a free webinar series previewing the school's courses. Don't miss out. Register today to attend, whether in person in Annecy, France, or at one of our satellite sites in Europe, or online via our live streaming. Gray-Scott School 2025, where HPC meets your potential.
So I can give the floor to Sébastien.
Hi everybody, so we are together for roughly 1 hour of presentation plus questions after that. So for the questions, don't hesitate to use the Q&A part close to the chat. On the bottom right of your window you have 3 dots, and if you open the menu you have the Q&A part where you can ask the question, and we will try to answer. So either following the presentation or at the end, depending on how it works. So today we will speak about unit test philosophy, how it can help on our application developments. And I will try to give during this presentation a bit the feedback I can give after practicing these techniques, this philosophy, for 13 years now. So I will mostly focus on the human aspects, not too much on the technical one, but more to give some hints on why it can be interesting to use this philosophy in your developments. So for the plan, I will first look on why I started to make this approach in my own developments. I will then give a little bit of philosophy. This will be a little bit the carrot of the presentation. I mean, why we are interested in this. Then we will move more in the details, thinking about testing methodology and giving my own feedback on my path about this in practice. So mostly the classes for which I'm looking this topic. And then if we have time, we'll try to give some timings to show that we can gain, in addition to the human aspects and technical aspects, sometimes a bit of development times also, because it's also in the loop in the end. So why I started to use unit tests? So once upon a time, I came back to my PhD time. So I make a master thesis in 2009 at the French CEA, and I was developing a Linux kernel module about memory management. And after 5 months of development, I was very happy because my module was working, so I was not so bad in the end. And it was fully working under my full KDE session under Linux. And of course, at CEA, our goal is to make numerical simulations. So the people from our team were coming to me and say, now we can try the real numerical simulation we have at the center, which is one big application of roughly 1.5 million line of C++ running on 16 threads, which at that time was quite, reasonable on the workstation we can have. So the director of the team was in my office. We started to run the application, and it launches. It runs for roughly half an hour, which is the timing we plan to run about. I start to save the data, so I was dancing in my in my office because everything looks to work. And then just before exiting, kernel panic. And of course, this is not so fun because now kernel panic, it means that you have no way to debug anything because your system is totally crashed. And you have to enter in a painful debugging way, which is dumping a log of every calls which is done to my kernel module and try to see what is happening during this path. So this is a lot painful because there was at least 65 million calls to my modules, and I needed to find what was the wrong call in the middle of that. So I finished by finding the solution, but those 2 months were really painful. And later I started my PhD, which was as a goal to make parallel malloc for this application in practice, also NumaWare. So I said myself that I cannot use the same approach because I did not want it to have again this kind of troubles. So I took what I learned at school and thinking about unit tests, and I took my Pellerino rods and went on that path to try to see what I can take from it for this work. So the feedback I will give is now, since this time, the time has passed, 13 years roughly, with 4 years in Scrum in industry, in a team. So I made a lot of projects, personal and industrial, with unit testing, which is roughly 17 projects now. I mean, mostly personals for the small one, plus some bigger one. And also have the chance to experiment some projects in industry without unit tests. So one of them was a big one, 150,000 lines of code with 50 developers. This shows also another way of working when we don't have it, how we feel by comparing the two situations, when I have and when I don't have. So I will try to give my feedback about that path. So let's now focus on the philosophy. So I will first go out in real life to try to give some points on the approach. So I will come back in history, and in 1945 at Hanford in the US, people wanted to make plutonium, and so they make some big reactors. They take some water and put them in the reactor so it makes the reaction activated and dump the water out, because at that time, of course, we wanted to go fast, and the ecology was not yet in the questions. The waste, of course, which are produced need to be handled, and the way to handle those waste at that time was to make a hole and to dump everything in the sand. Let's say it costs something like 12 people, an excavator and a truck. Cheap, fast. For the liquid waste, some tanks in the sand, and it's fine. But 55 years later, there is some problems because now those tanks start to leak, and you need to do something. Price of this, let's say, is a small mistake. Some reports has shown recently that the work will be activated on the site until 2090 and will cost for roughly in total, if you sum all of the years, between 300 and $600 billion, which is quite a lot for something you wanted to make fast at the beginning. This is what we call in software engineering, something we have in software engineering, which is quite often. This is what we call technical debt. And if we came back to software, which is what is interesting us here, there was Capers-Jones in 1996, which make a large study about the cost of solving some bugs in software. And he shown this curve. So here I will not comment all the charts, but I will mostly focus on this purple curve, which shows that when you are coding, resolving a bug costs not nothing, but something small. But as long as you are progressing in the development, you will see that correcting the bugs, as long as you are going closer and closer to the release time, the price of solving the bugs are increasing. So you need to find some ways to balance this, which you see that here there is some keywords which are postponing: unit tests, function test, and system test, which is one way of introducing some automated tests in the path of the development before delivering the product to the clients. And we see also that once the product is delivered to the clients, which is a point which is interesting the more myself here, is that it costs roughly, I mean, it depends on the project, but for the average project which has been taken by this study, $16,000 to solve one bug. We can understand this because once the project is deployed on the client side, you need to discuss a lot to make any changes, and everything is in production. You cannot make a delivery every second to make the changes applied to your clients. Also, you have all your stuff done inside your software. So if you make one change, it probably impacts some things outside of your software, and you need to discuss with all the people involved in the path. So let's now say that probably testing is one of the good approach. So let's think about this testing philosophy. And again, I will first start my presentation by staying on real life, and we will think for a few moments that we are a car developer. So we are building a car engineer, and we will focus for ourselves on the gearbox. Okay, something nothing with computer science, but just to think what we do in real life and we sometimes don't do in software. So if we want to build the gearbox, there is two ways. Either you make a gearbox with some gears, you put it in the car, and you sell the car to the client. And then your client probably you, but you have to pray that your car is now working well. So probably it has been done for the first car which has been made, but now if your car is built like this, we'll probably not buy it. At least I hope for you. So this is not the correct way. Let's say that in software we are not doing such a bad approach, but not far away. In software, most of the time when we develop, we tend to do that. We build our gearbox, we put it in a car, and we take the first intern student which is coming in summer, and we tell him, okay, you take the key of the car. Now you make your path with the car between Grenoble and Marseille, and you came back to say us if everything is working. Let's say that in some research lab or in some companies, we can see a bit this approach not so rarely. a bit more serious, you can give some hints to the summer students. You can give him a stethoscope and saying, okay, while you are running, you put the stethoscope on your head, and sometimes you try to hear if the gearbox is making some noise, and you try to report us if there is a problem. So this is what we can call manual testing, and I mean, at least when we are making some prototypes, this is quickly what we are falling on. And sometimes the prototypes now transform in a product, and then this is the only way we are testing the softwares in the end. So let's say this is not a real serious way, but this is not uncommon in computer science. Hopefully again, I never seen a car engineer along the road trying to debug his car that way. So probably this is not what the car engineer are using. So better way, we can do still manual testing, but this time in a controlled environment. We will try to avoid to go on the highway with lots of car and some difficult situations. We can try to use a test circuit. So the test circuit is something like this. We have some run points, some roads, and some parkings, and everything to try to test the car. And this time we make a list of tests to perform. So we try to perform every time the same test. Let's say we call this a test plan. And this is a first step in the progress. We try to reproduce a way to test the software. Now, problem in the software, we don't do just 5 gear position, but we do a bit more. And you probably don't want to test every feature of your software every time you want to make a change, and mostly if it's done by hand. So probably not again the good way in the end. So you can make some progress. You can try to automate this list of tests. Now you have the list of tests to do every time. So you can say, we can automate it. So you take your car, you put some cameras, some motors to try to control the wheel of the car, and you try to make the car running automatically on your circuit. And you say now, cool, we have an automated test, which in software we tend to call an integration test. Probably you will see the link with what we tend to do in software. But the problem is that when the car has a problem, it will crash, probably outside of the road, and finish that way. And you, as a gearbox engineer, you need to come on the circuit and to try to guess what is the problem which has made the car crashed, which can be the gearbox or, by the way, something else in the car. So first, you will have to identify if the problem is the gearbox, which will take you a little bit of time, because the car is totally crashed, the gearbox has exploded, some gears has gone through the top of the cars, and everything is broken. So you have pieces everywhere, and you need to guess what has happened. So you will see at that step that if probably the automation is not a problem in software, the debugging will become one afterward when you have a lot of tests and your software become complicated. So let's take a more practical solution for a car engineer, which is using a test bench. So you take only the gearbox, because it's what you are interested in when you are developing your topic, and you put it in a controlled situation. This time you take the gearbox alone, and you put it attached to a wall. You put it an electric motor, which make less noise than a fuel one, and you try to use your gearbox like this. You can automate some things easily because you have access to all the gearbox. By the way, as the gearbox is fully accessible, opposite to when it's inside the car, you can put some captors. For example, an infrared camera to detect if your gearbox is heating at some places. You can put some probes for the temperature inside the gearbox probably. And you can also make some microphones to detect the shaking of the gearbox and see if there is something wrong. By the way, making this kind of metrics is also something you can sell to your clients, because you can show directly, easily what you have improved in your software. And you'll also be able to convince yourself that you make some progress and not going in the wrong way. So let's notice the continuous transition, because in this unit test philosophy, we start with one gear, which is a unit test. We test a unit, one gear. Then we test 2 gears. Then we test 3, 4, 5, 10 gears together. Then the gearbox which we can call an integration test. We test it entirely. And then we have the end-to-end test, which can correspond in our image, testing the gearbox in the car to have everything in place in its final environment. So people tend to have these three words: unit test, integration test, and end-to-end test, which let's think that there is a kind of big split between all those three words. Personally, I prefer to think this as a linear and contiguous transition between the minor unit test and some unit tests which test a bit more, and some unit tests in the end which are still integration tests but test everything. So me, I try to prefer to see this way of going fluently from one step to the other. Even if in the end, probably for the end-to-end test, you will use some different tools than what you use for the first parts. So what is a unit test? I mean, when you want to run, for example, this is in Python, you can use PyTest to run your unit test. So let's say you have a particle class and with two tests inside. So I run PyTest and I get a result saying that everything is green, everything is passing. So I don't need more at that step. Everything is okay, so I can continue to code. So what is a unit test? A unit test, this is something very simple in practice. This is most of the time just a function, which in most framework is called test underscore something, and which have some assertions where we will test some properties of our function or object when we are calling it. So here, for example, I'm testing an absolute value and I will take three values, -10, 20, and 0, to test the various cases which happen with this function and to test if it reacts the right way. We can do, so of course, some more complex tests. Let's say we have a particle, so this is more for physicists. Some other computer scientists prefer to take the turtle, but we will take the particle here. So let's say we place a particle to position 0. We will test with an assertion that it's rightly at the 0 position. And we will move this particle and test again that now it has been effectively moved to the position 10. So this is a very simple test, and this is what is used in the examples in most computer science courses, which is not really what we have in real life. We will see, but this is already something to understand what is unit testing. More closely to real life, we most of the time have different objects which interact together in an application. And we can take another example, which is now the next step of the particle, is to take two particles, one going in one direction and one going in the other direction close together. And of course, they will collide. So this is for physicists from CERN, for example, this kind of example. And we will test that the collision has effectively happened, so that there is a collision. And we will test that the particles in the end is going in the other way all together after going in their collision. So let's say that this is a bit more complex unit test. So of course in real life the unit test will become a bit more complex, but if it's far more complex, it's a problem. It's that you are going out of the unit test philosophy. So if you want to make unit test, you need to have some unit tests which ideally should stay simple. Because when you want to debug your unit test, you need to understand quickly what it is doing. So if your test is becoming big, it's more an integration test, and that you need to probably think again what you're doing and split your code or your test in a better way. So let's say you can have something more complex than what I have here, but let's say that if your test is now taking 300 lines, you are probably wrong in the path. Except if it's an exception in your test list, but if many tests are like this, it's a problem. So notice assert keyword, which is what you will find in most unit test frameworks. This is the assertion which you will place everywhere to check if everything is right. And the probes in the gearbox situation I was discussing before. So now the good point is that with my unit test, I have something nice, because now when the test is failing, I have something which appear here. Is that it's saying that the test is failing, which test is failing, and also giving me the values and an extract of the code which has failed, which is a good point, opposite to the integration test. On the integration test, most of the time, this is a script which runs the full software, And when the full software crashed, the integration test tend to say that things has crashed and don't give you the details on which line in the code is causing the problem. So this is what the unit test is a bit doing, is that it focuses you on a small part of the code to know what you need to debug from that. So it not solve everything for you, but at least it gives a lot of information which are useful to go faster. Let's say in real life, of course, you have not a single unit test. This is an example extracted from one of my projects. So I'm running, this is a project of 10,000 lines of code, something. So an IO project. You can notice here that the execution time of all those tests is 9 seconds, something. So it's short enough so I can run it roughly every minute when I'm developing. When I'm using the unit test philosophy on my side, I'm writing my code for let's say a minute, and then I run my unit test to check if everything is right. If something is broken, I fix, and then I go back that way by coding, testing all the time during my day. So this is fairly efficient, and we will see later that with integration test, this is not that way you can use because it takes more time to run the full software most of the time. So let's come back about my experience and feelings about unit test, more human aspects. So I was saying that probably it's nice to have some tests in a project. So unit tests, we understand that we need to think a bit to design the code to be able to write this unit test, and it will cost a bit to implement them. So most of the time, the first thing we want to push in a team is the integration test. So testing the full software, the automated car I was showing in the previous image. So when you say about integration test automated, people are quickly agreeing in the team most of the time. They want to use that. How to proceed to make it, this is most of the time a question, and there can be a lot of discussion on the good way to practice this. Most of the time, the first time people are using this kind of approach, it finishes as a kind of, let's say, dirty script, shell script or something like this, to automate the call of the software and checking some outputs. This is the first way to proceed. I mean, that's fine for a couple of tests and for a first try. So it looks easier in the first look, but the problem is that we will see later that it can quickly cost a lot. In my experience, we practiced this during my PhD. In my team, we were developing an MPI implementation as a team, and we wanted to have some tests, and we were unable to unit test everything because the code was not designed for and it was already existing. And we wanted at some point to import a battery of test suite which was already existing somewhere, and try to run it in different situations to cover all the cases we have with our framework, which finishes in the end with 10,000 integration tests. The first time we run all those tests, of course, 5,000 was failing, so it was a bit depressing. So most of the time it was due to the same error for most of them, but anyway, someone has to come to the meeting and to say that something is broken, and 5,000 tests were broken without having a clear idea of why. And what is more a problem is that running this test suite was now taking 1 week, because every time we needed to launch the job on the cluster for every test, so 10,000 jobs to send and to wait all of them to be finished. So it was a long running, so it was a bit depressing and hard to debug. So in the end, there was just a couple of people in the team looking really on the test suite, and we were a few to look on it. So it was not. We win something because in the end we solved all the problems we have seen with this test suite, but it was a lot of efforts to make it running. So let's say it was buyback, not a mistake because we win something, but something very costly. Let's say it's another situation. It was in a Scrum team, so it was a Scrum which was a Scrum project which was not using unit tests, only integration test when I arrived. And the test suite at that time was a bit more reasonable than the previous project, but it was already 40 minutes. So let's compare. I was saying in my own project it was 9 seconds to run the unit test, and in practice the unit test list I was showing you in the previous example is an equivalent of this project. I mean, a bit simpler, but an equivalent. So let's say that with unit test, you passed 10 seconds to test, and with integration test, we were passing 40 minutes to test everything. So I'm not saying we should not do any integration test, but doing only that is a bit questioning in practice. Because also the complexities to maintain this integration test was a lot of efforts. The maintenance was in practice 1.5 developer fully dedicated to this during the project. And this over a team of 15 developers. So let's say 10% of our team was attached to maintain the test suite. The more funny thing is that the company did move the CI environment to something else, and there was a lot of issues to make the migration during this. A lot of problems because, of course, when you have automated your test with the cars, with cameras, motors, everything is fine when you have a fixed environment, but when you change the environment, it starts to become very, very difficult to make everything working again. So in practice, the migration of this test suite has took 5 months for the team. So not the full team dedicated, but let's say it's a good quarter of the team dedicated to migrate the test suite. This was again a lot of efforts where for the same project I was making, a close project I was making, the 9 seconds of unit test was taking 1 week to port in the new environment because we were having some other troubles with this new environment. But 1 week versus 5 months, this is what it costs in the end to port with your ARM your test suite in practice. Yeah, I mean it was simpler to create at the beginning, but after that it cost a lot. So at some point we can say, yeah, but okay, integration test. This is not. I mean, some integration test is fine, but we should have something else. So unit test. Okay, unit test. So you come to the team in the morning and you say, okay, probably they have seen, you send them to see this presentation and you motivate them to make unit tests. The problem is that everyone is understanding that now you need to make some efforts because you need to write the unit test and probably you will have some problems because the code is not designed to support unit test. So you will be slower at start, which in the today world is not so easy to sell. And in practice, as you need to make some efforts and learn something, it's a bit harder to push in the team when people are not already aware about this methodology. And also, let's say, to be honest, that unit test is a bit hard to introduce in a pre-existing software. This is one thing also. Try to get the chance when you have a new software to write to take the methodology from the beginning. And there is some first kill sentences which comes when you try to push this kind of philosophy in a team. Oh, this function, this is too hard, so we will not test it. This one, it called too many others, so it's hard to test. Too many objects to be called in this function. Hard to test, so we'll not do it. Or this one, it's very simple. Too simple, I don't need to test it. And this one, please don't touch this code, don't change anything in it so you can test it because it was very hard to make it running, so we don't want to block it. So this is something which happens most of the time when you have a pre-existing software without unit test and the people not knowing the methodology. And this is one of the killers to make this approach in a team. So you need to take some time to discuss with the people to motivate for this kind of approach. So let's say it's about myself because I was getting courses at university like this from my teacher and they said, yeah, unit test is fine, showing the turtle example, I mean the particle example. And I say myself, okay, yeah, but I want to use that probably in my software, but my software is more complex than a turtle. So how I can really practice this? This was a question for me. So I was not really convinced at the beginning, to be honest. And I tried. So I took one of my software I had, a personal one, and I make unit test in it. My problem is that this software was already existing, so I have everything. So I have the impression to lose my time because I was thinking that my software was already working. By the way, I was discovering that it was not really the case, so it was a bit frustrating because I was seeing some bugs in what I wrote. So it was hard in practice because my code was not designed to be able to make tests. And for this first try, I was not really seeing the benefits to make this test. And to be honest, with the feedback I have now, I already had most of my code, so it was painful to not have the real gains of a unit test. So let's say to give a small image in real life, it's a bit like if people are saying me that making a marathon is a good thing for my body. So I try to make a marathon thinking that I will feel better myself. And after 5 minutes of running without breathing, I was saying that I was tired and totally broken along the road. But this is probably because I didn't use the good tools and the good approach in my test. So I will try to say that to benefit from the unit test, you need a bit of discipline. There is some things you should ban from your sentences. For example, there is one thing, as I said, saying that this is a POC, I will make my test later. This is a very bad idea. Very, very bad idea. Why? Because you will never do the test later for some reasons. First, because your design will not permit it, because you didn't think about that. If your gearbox has not been planned to be attached to a wall, nor to have an electric motor plugged on it, nor to put some probes, it will be very hard to make your test bench. Also, when your program is running, we are like this in computer science. Once it's running, we want to do some new stuff and move to the next step, and not came back to make only testing for weeks. Nobody is happy to make unit tests for weeks. For example, if you develop for your POC for 1 month, it will take at least 1 month to make the unit test, and nobody is happy to make unit tests for 1 month. This is something, I mean, in real life for electronics or this kind of stuff, we are kind of happy to make it. For computer science, let's to be honest, that we are a bit less kind to accept it. The more problematic things is that in practice, it finishes that you have said you have a prototype, it's running, you have shown to your colleagues what it's doing, and then now your boss has probably sold it to a client, and now it's time to debug it and to make it running because you have probably 1 month left to get everything in place. If you are in research, it's a bit different. Probably your boss didn't sold it, but your boss have told you to make a paper, and now you focus on the paper. This is, let's say, it's quite the same. But from my experience, it's also that if you do your test later, you also lose half of the benefits of the unit test. So what is the benefits of the unit test? Because when I started, I was thinking that the benefits is testing. I mean, being sure that my software is working, but I understood after time that in practice, it's also something else. So as I said, it's testing. For me, it's 20% of the interest of unit test. The 80% which stays are something else. First thing, it forces you to make a design because you cannot make a unit test if you don't have a design. So you are forced to make a design, which will increase the quality of your software by default. For example, one of the common example when you are making unit tests, global variables are a very bad idea to make unit tests. So you will quickly understand it by yourself when you write your unit test that it's a wrong pattern, and you will time after time try to remove all your global variables from your design. So it's also a good way to progress by yourself. It makes a specification of your code also, because now you have a documentation for every function and how it is used in a simple context. So it's also documenting the internal SAP API, not only the external one. If you want to make a refactoring or rewriting part of the software, you have the unit test to know what are the corner cases, or if you broke something inside this part of the program, which is fairly efficient in practice. Because without unit test, if you pronounce the word refactoring at the team meeting in the morning, you will have probably everything in a hurry in the team. Also, good point when you have a new developer coming in the project, let's say the internships, or you in 6 months because you will have forgotten what you have done 6 months before. If you broke something, you will have a unit test which tells you what is broken, where, and so in a few minutes you will fix your problem, where if you don't have such unit test, you will just pass a day to find why your code is broken, or probably just didn't notice that you broken something. So also a good way is that as you are making all the time coding, testing, coding, testing, coding, testing, coding, testing, you always know that what you are doing is working. Don't say that you are going in the right way, but at least it's working. So it stops also one thing, which is a funnel effect, where you go on a path and just 5 months later if it's working well in the end, because all the path before has been walked without being able to really test what you are doing, because you don't have everything in place. So this is also a good point for your head when you leave in the evening. About quality guy. Sometimes in software we have some rush. Of course, when we have a rush, the quality of the software will decrease. And the problem is that in a team, we are humans and not the same. And some people are more exigent than some others. Me, I'm not lucky. Sometimes, most of the time, it's me. And the problem is that we don't have the same view on the code and the same warnings. Some people will see some red lights sooner than some others. And when you come to the team meeting, there can be some very hard discussion at some point if some people are seeing some red lights where some others are not seeing it as red lights about the quality of the code, the status. If you don't have any unit tests, the problem is that you stay on a purely human feelings to discuss. So some people feel the problem, some others not, and you have no way to cut off in the discussion. If you have unit tests, the good point is that you have at least a number of unit tests broken. So if there is half of the unit tests which are broken, you clearly have a problem, and it's a bit easier in the meeting to discuss that you need to take some time to solve the problem. So in some ways, it's giving you some light, which are non just human feelings, but also a technical feedback, which is easier in practice in the real life to accept in some ways. It's also a good teacher because, as I said, it forces you to make a design. So what is a good design? We don't know really. This is the top problem of computer science. The good point is that as it forces you to make the design, it forces you to learn design. So it's a kind of teacher, because if you make your design and you fail to make your unit test because it's too hard to make it, is that your design is bad. So you will try, probably not this time, but the next time, to use another design, and step after step, by forcing you to make this go and back between the test and the design, you will learn by yourself what is a good design and what is not a good design. It's a good thing also because the feedback is not someone coming to you to say you that that your thing is a bad design, but you get it automatically by yourself by seeing your tests, either because they are failing or either because they are hard to maintain or to write. So this is why you need to see it as soon as possible, because if you see it directly during the development, you can change your design immediately instead of seeing it 6 months later, where you cannot change anymore anything, because everything is depending on what you have done before that. So in some ways also it will prevent you from getting a gas machine. So let's say it's why. So let's say you have a function morning not kiss. So the function morning not kiss, it's first to take a coffee, to take the dog out, and to take the car out of the garage. Now there is some things we do in computer science, is that we split everything in classes or functions if we do right design. Every function has its own responsibility. This is the nice way to proceed. But in high performance computing, we want to optimize things. So sometimes we want to say that while I'm taking my coffee, I want to take the lips and to take the key in my pocket. So I take the lips on my hand, and I put the key on my pocket. So I'm ready to make the other step afterward. I finished to take my coffee, and I'm totally ready to make the next step without having another function to call. This is the kind of optimization we tend to do in HPC or system programming. This come quickly in C. But now the question, if you want to make some unit tests, you want to make a unit test about the dog, for example. Now the problem is that to test the dog, you need to call the coffee function because you need the lib to take the dog out. So clearly you are seeing in this case that you have made a mistake because you need to call the coffee, which has nothing to do with the dog, to make your unit test, and it says you that your design is wrongly done. So in practice, you should split the two other parts on some functions which are outside, eventually called by the coffee function, but are not inside the coffee functions. And the test is telling you that you have made a mistake here. So you should stop, think, and make the thing KISS. Keep it simple and stupid. This is the key word of programming. About facing the entropy. You know that software is all the time increasing in complexity. So you start with something simple, and over time the complexity will increase. Let's say that the good point is that if you have unit tests, the software increases in terms of complexity, and what you should do at some point is refactoring. So if your software has increased too much, you need to change the design inside your software to make it simpler, at least the part which has some problems, and you will decrease the complexity. Then, of course, the complexity will increase again, and you will make another refactoring. Complexity will increase again, you will make another refactoring. Of course, when you pronounce the word refactoring without having any unit test, you're afraid everyone, because you will change a lot of codes probably to make your refactoring. And if you have no way to see if something is broken, you will just have to pray that you have seen everything before making the next delivery. If you have unit tests, you have a list of things you broke, so you can fix them, and or also decide that if you broke too many things, that your refactoring is wrong. Okay, so you can try refactoring. So in practice, when you have unit tests, you refactor regularly, which permits you to follow this kind of path by keeping the complexity of your software low. So when I say low, it's in practice something more increasing still, but a little bit slowly. And it avoids, when you are right here, to have the errors required by the project to maintain the code. Which when you start to have errors in a team, it starts to become a problem for the team. It's also reduce one of the big problem when you're working in teams. This is the silos effect. Without tests, it's very hard to go to the part of someone else in a project. So if you don't do anything, you will tend to have people focused on each one on his own topic. This is especially true in HPC, where we have very complex different topics in the software. Network, fine optimization, builds, math, everything which comes in a numerical simulation or in the runtimes for the system programming in the Underwood. And if you don't take care about this, every developer will stay on his own part and stay in his silo, and we will have a lot of heroes, everyone on his part. The problem of the hero on his part is that when you want to go to the part of another one, let's say, for example, this one want to look on this part here, you have no way to know how everything is working. So if he's making a patch, he will of course break something. And if there is no unit test to tell that something is broken, the commit will go in the Git without checking. Either the hero from here sees the bug, or either he don't see it. But probably when we will see the bug in the production system later, we'll say to the first guy, yeah, next time you don't come anymore in this part because you don't know how to practice it. Where when you have some unit tests, of course, if some unit tests are broken, you see it immediately what is the problem. And also if this guy, if the first guy is not knowing the second part, he will also probably get quickly some feedback on on how things are working, so will also be more efficient on this part. So everyone can help the others more easily. Question of knowledge. The knowledge of the software is in the code, but not only on the code. The knowledge of software, this is only the knowledge you have in your head about the corner cases which you encountered when you develop the software. And in practice, you will quickly understand that the knowledge you have in a team is more in this part than in the code itself, because it's where you invested a lot, because this is what you pay, this is the people you pay, the experience they have, the expertise they have. So if you want to make again a version 2 of your software, this is this part of the knowledge you will take over, and not really the code. So the good point of the unit test is that it encoded the unit test in the knowledge in the tests themselves. So it's useful in case of turnover, in terms of retirements. It's very useful if you want to make a version 2, because you have the list of all the corner cases you have encountered to make the version 1. And if you want also to translate it in another language, you just have to translate it, the code and the test, and you will have everything working again. Let's say an example, when I want to port my memorial allocator, during my PhD, I made 1 year to develop it in C. I made a C++ translation, which took only 1 month because of the unit tests. Otherwise, it's something very complex to do again. And I make again a further implementation in Rust, which took me 2.5 weeks to get something working, because I have the unit test. Otherwise, this kind of code, they are very hard to tell. So there is some questions. I can read one. So I will keep the question for the end probably. Yeah, that's true. So the person is asking, I have written the test, so as long as they are okay, I don't have to ask myself more questions about quality and performance of my code. So true in some ways, because the metric now about the quality and the performance of the code is the test. So it's automatic, it's stored somewhere. So of course, it makes you read a bit, not totally free, of course, but a bit more free about that. So you can focus more on what you do next. So this is one of the benefits also about unit tests. So I hope I answered. And the others, I will keep them for next. Just one comment. I see sometimes, like the team I was at some point, making Scrum without unit tests. Scrum is a methodology built on top of unit tests. So if you don't do a unit test, you will probably finish in a broken situation at some point. Mostly because in Scrum, you didn't plan for a long term. So if you make a mistake and you cannot refactor, because you cannot refactor without unit test, or at least it costs a lot if you do it, but you will probably finish to be screwed if you make a mistake, or you need to be very, very lucky. This I will go very quickly. When you are developing and you have a test suite which takes 40 minutes, it costs a lot more energy to run in the CI cluster than if you have a test suite which takes 10 seconds, of course. So you will require more resources for your team, or also on your laptop to run your test suite if you have something which takes hours to run. So this is also an argument about ecology. Also something about the unit test you can develop directly on your laptop. You don't need the final cluster to develop everything, because it's easier the tests are independent of the machine. This I will skip. So this is already what I said. So let's say in the end, I'm myself practicing like this. I make a lot of unit tests because they cost less to implement. Then I make, of course, some integration tests, because I'm not saying that integration is totally bad. It's just that you don't need to, it's better to not count only on that. So making some integration tests and some end-to-end tests, because they cost more in practice to implement and to maintain. So for the development part, I'm most of the time here, and I have some automated more global tests to run automatically at some points, either just before delivery or either nightly or weekly, if we don't want to lose too much resources to run them. And in research, just to say that in research, because most of the time people are considering that the unit test is for the industry, because in industry we want to have something running and working. And in research, okay, we want something working also, but we can say we have a bit less pressure on that. But in research, we have probably tons of ideas, and we want to explore many things and don't want to lose our time in debugging. This is not what we want. We want to pass our time to validate the ideas, not the way to debug it. So if we want to explore, it's probably a good way to go also through unit tests, because it will make you faster to make your prototypes, and also because you will probably want to change your path. That's research. I don't know where you go, so you will probably go right or left, or change your way back, depending on what you learn on your topic. And making a change of direction is easier if you have unit test to refactor than without. Timing example. So I will just take an example of timings because sometimes we say, yeah, it cost me some times to make the unit test, but it costs times, but I lose time. So, but I win in the end. So I said I win on the human aspect and in my brain because it's more free, not having to think about everything. But we also gain in time. This is what I will show here. So I will take one of the example I had during my my path. It was in LHCb, so at CERN, in the research and development code about scaling studies. So the goal was to transfer 40 terabytes of data going out of the LHCb detector. This is what is now in production at CERN. And to take over this 40 terabytes of data inside 500 servers, saturating the links of an InfiniBand network at 80 gigabytes per second for a network going at 100 gigabytes per second. Something challenging, huh? And to send the data aggregated on this 500 servers to 3,000 servers. So let's say 3,500 servers which need to be controlled and the data spread over them. So of course for that we developed a prototype to evaluate this technology and if we were really able to make it. So there was the first prototype which has been made and the different part of the development of this prototype has been plotted here in red for the first version without unit test, and in green for a second version I made when I arrived with unit test. So what I want to say here is that, okay, don't take those numbers as exact numbers because I was not the first developer of the first version, so you compare two developers and me as a second developer which already has a first prototype. So this is not exactly a total comparison, but it gives some kind of hints. So for the core developments already I went 2 months. This is what we can see here. Let's say I didn't really win it because I have a first version. So the 2-month win I win was more because I had the first version as a reference. For the libfabric driver I win 2 months. Here it was a real win because it was very hard to do the patch in the first version, where in the new version it was very easier, mostly because I didn't have to test the base code in a real server, but I was able to do it totally on my laptop. What is more interesting is the TCP version. The TCP version, it has been made first by a network expert, which was someone with a lot of expertise on network programming in C. And the version 2 has been made by someone with very basic knowledge in C+ programming. So we can see that even with someone less expert, we have took less time to make the implementation because the design was better, because there was some unit test also to help him when he broke something, and also to help myself when I was helping him to quickly see where the mistakes are coming when I was in front of his computer in his code. So it's already a big win because even if I win just 1 month, I also win on the human aspect because with some person less expert, I can still do the things, and it's also very interesting and very important when we're working in a team. For the InfiniBand verbs, the version 1 has been made by a student which has made an InfiniBand simulator before. So it has taken 11 months to be made because the design was not permitting it and the debugging was very hard. Myself, I had also to lose some months to debug this version. And the version 2 has been made by someone which has no MPI, no RDMA knowledge, a bit of C++. This was a PhD student working on GPUs, which came with us at CERN for 2 months. So he didn't know the project, he came for 2 months, and he was able to make the driver in 1 month, plus 2 months of performance testing. And then myself, I made some tests with his driver on a 200 server cluster, let's say 3 months later, and everything was working, no bug. So let's say here I win directly in a possibility to collaborate with some people easily, and also to get something working as soon as possible to make my research, because this was the goal to test the thing and not to debug the software. Omnipath, same thing. This is myself which has made the implementation the second time, so it's a bit hard to compare because I already had the experience of the first one. But anyway, I win 4 months to make the work. The good point also is the failure recovery, because if some people has already tried to program failure recovery in InfiniBand, between servers. It's one of the challenging thing to make in a network. In practice, this has been made by a student who has made the Infinimond driver. And as I had some unit tests to test every deconnection, reconnection, all the protocols in pure simulation on the laptop, it was very fast to develop everything. And then we had just an intent to plug the driver hooks in the Infinimond driver to test in the real system. And let's say in 3 months it has been made to have everything in place. 2 months for the baseline, plus 1 month in the Infinimond driver, which when someone has already done this kind of work is something challenging. For example, if you want to do it in a code like OpenMPI, which has mostly 0 unit tests. This example will just go really quickly. This is for the same project. At some point, we wanted to make a test on a real supercomputer. So this was Marconi, which is one of the top, I forget, it was top 12, something like this, in the top 500. And we had an access to the full cluster for 2 days, which was given to us. And we were getting the date just 2 weeks before. So we got a mail saying that in 2 weeks you can have access to the supercomputer for yourself alone. Please be ready to make your run. Okay. So we went there. It was a cluster with a new technology, which was OmniPath. This was the first cluster installed with this technology. I mean, the first big one. Of course, the cluster was not fully installed. It was in the process to be made in production. So the file system was not working. The job manager was not working. And we arrived on the site to connect on the supercomputer, and the people, the administrator, as they cannot do anything during our tests, they come in the room with us to look on what we were doing. So everyone, let's say 6 or 7 people, were in front of me looking on everything I was doing, and plugged my my computer on the projector. And now, please do your test. Huh? Demo effect or not? Of course, thanks to the unit test, there was no demo effect, and everything was working, and we were able, everything. The problem we had were due to the machine mostly. We plan to have during this test in practice. So you can see also that for research, you gain something. You can go to make some tests in real cases, to expose you to complex cases to make your research. So let's conclude. This I will skip. So I will just give you some timing rules. I said I don't make a POC without making unit tests. This is not totally true. Myself, I allow myself now to make 2-3 weeks of coding without unit tests, but then if the project is interesting, I stop myself, I make the test, and then I continue for a month, depending on the duration of the project. If you know that your project is going for a long time from the beginning, please try to start the unit test from the starting point. This is far easier and far better. Let's say, honestly, for the 1 or 2 first month, you will be slower than if you don't do unit tests. But then you will see later that you will win on the path, as I shown in my example. For the coverage, sometimes we speak about test coverage. I didn't discuss it technically here. But let's say it depends on the language. In Python, targeting something like 90% is reasonable. Don't try to focus 100%. This is totally useless. I have seen one project once, the previous I was on, they targeted 100%, and it was very painful to make any patches because they enforced it by a rule. And it was in the end totally useless because it's too much. Most of the books about unit tests, I told the same thing on that. Try to limit yourself to something which is acceptable. So 90% is correct for Python. C++, it's harder to get everything, so 80% is already nice. And my rule is to get 1 test per function. Not test everything in the function, but to have at least 1 example on how to test the function to check that this function is testable. This is what is important, that you can test this function. This is what is really important to get to validate that your design is correct. The very big win, the design. This I will skip. The code is your best friend, so try to make your code speaking to you the nice way. With unit test, when it tells you that there is a mistake, it gives you some hints, so it's a better discussion with your code than if you have just a seg fault during the execution. Just say it's in the team. Don't forget that the code is in the middle of the team, and most of the discussion will go through or around the code between the people. So if your code is badly done and there is no way to test it easily, some situation will become hard at some point. And when the quality of the code will decrease, sometimes the quality of the discussion between the people will decrease also. So it will also, decrease the link between the code and the person, but also directly between the person themselves by making some tensions in the team and the people probably not happy. So taking care of the quality of the code is something not only for quality, but also for the health of the team, of the people. So to conclude, just think that you are in a software, so in a virtual environment, but some things can be compared to the real life, and you can sometimes compare what you are doing and see that in real life you will probably not do the same way than what you do in a virtual without thinking, as the car engineering example we have seen, because it has no sense to make a car without making some unit tests in practice. But in software we have software without. We tend to think that making integration tests costs nothing because this is virtual. This is not true because on long term you can pass a long time to maintain your test suite. So take care of you by making a clean test suite. This is important. In research, if you want to explore, you don't want to lose your time in debugging. So it's also interesting to make unit tests in research. This is not only for software engineering, for industry. On the human aspect, so this is something I have seen in unit test also. For yourself, you gain a lot because you are more free in your head. You progress in a kind of slower but faster way at some point. At least you are more healthy on your code. But if you are more healthy yourself, you are more healthy also in your team. So your team, you will be more happy. So this is something you need to be patient because the first time you will make unit test, you will be probably a bit afraid. But take your time. Step after step, it will become your friend and something you cannot work without afterward. Thanks.
Thank you, Sébastien. So we have 7 questions left. So I'll pass through every question. Thank you very much for this clear, interesting, and entertaining presentation. I have several questions, which I'm sure are a bit naive. So first one, is the unit testing approach suitable for scientific computing applications, numerical simulation, or physical phenomena, where it's difficult to have analytical or reference solution for simulated phenomena?
Yeah, good question. So this, I don't yet made test myself on the math part, so I still have questions now to do it. The thing is that in a numerical simulation, you first have two things. You have the maths themselves, which probably are not so easy to test by themselves. But all around, you have a code which is, for example, handling your mesh, handling your communication, handling your IOs, handling your file format, handling your configuration. And all of this part of the code is testable in terms of unit tests. So already, if you don't have bugs on that part, you can focus on what is your job in numerical simulation, which is your math. So I would say, at least if you can test everything which is computer science in your numerical simulation, you already make a big win compared to if you just write your simulation without testing anything. Then for the math part themselves, this is probably your numerical knowledge, which is, where you have your expertise as a numeric people, if this is your case. This is how I will answer on this.
Okay, second question. What about the qualitative dimension for testing? I mean a test, whatever it is, it will never test all possible bugs. So the problem shift to how do you build the most relevant tests? I suppose this is very project dependent.
Yeah, true. And that's a good question also because, as I said, this is what I focused at the beginning when I was making unit tests, is to test everything. Every corner cases, every problems which can arise with my algorithm. And I understood in the end that what is important is not to test everything in terms of cases, but to test some cases to validate the design. As I said, the very big win is to force you to make a design in your code. So make such that you have one or two tests per function, not testing all the corner cases. This is not required. And once you encounter a bug, you add the test step after step. Every time you encounter a bug, you add a new unit test so you didn't regress on this bug. I think this is in terms of balance between time to invest and time to win, what is the good balance? Because if you try to test every corner cases from the beginning, it will cost two things. First, it will cost you a lot of time to make it first, which will probably not make a big win in the end. And also, if you have to make a refactoring during the first phases of the development, you will pay a lot to support all the tests. So my recommendation is during the first phase of the development, make at least one test per function or a group of functions, depending on how your code is done. And then to enrich the test afterward with the bugs you encounter to not regress on them. This is how I balance myself on this topic now.
Okay. Third question. What approach should you take when all the unit tests are okay, but the integration test is broken? So all the tests are okay, but the integration test at the end is still broken.
But then this is a problem of the integration test, because the integration test didn't tell anything on what is wrong. This is a problem with the integration test. If the integration test is broken, but then you have to. I mean, broken. You mean in what way? Because there is two ways of broken. I mean, it's broken in its design, or broken is because there is a bug. If there is a bug, I would say try to understand the bug and make a unit test which reproduces the bug, so you don't have it again. If the design of the integration test is broken and take too long, for example, or something like this, to be seen if you keep the integration test. I mean, if it shows a bug, you need to fix the bug, of course. But sometimes the integration tests are so complex that the bug is not always in the program itself. It can be also a problem in the integration test. I have seen this. The Scrum team I was working on, which was making only integration tests and not unit. Let's say a quarter of the time, the problems were not rising from the code itself, but from the test suite. And in this case, the question is the test suite so useful? So as we didn't have any unit tests, yes. But if you have unit test aside, probably keep your unit test and rewrite your integration test or rework.
Maybe I can add another question myself. I give myself the a way to talk because it's related. Maybe you can comment on that. If you have unit test, so you are very proud of your unit test, or you have an integration test, but if the integration test relies on delays and sleeps to be sure that everything is working, every time you change your machine, everything is broken, and maybe that's not the good way to go also, even if you have a test.
I can probably present one slide more. Yeah. One of the problems you will have if you have a broken test environment, which is an integration test. For example, you have a project with only integration test and you want to introduce unit test inside this project. So of course you will not be able to unit test everything. This is not true. I mean, if you don't have think about it about the beginning, it's probably wrong to, wrong. You will have to invest too much time to get it for the full software. But what you can do is to start from the leaf function. If you want to train yourself on your software and you don't have one which already exists, when you have some work to do on the leaf function, try to make the unit test, because here it's easy to do. And for the top function, but then you have the integration test and you have to accept that situation is what it is. And step by step, you will be able probably to make the unit test going up. And if you are lucky, probably to get the full software. But in practice, you can already train yourself on the leaf function to learn. Takes the time to learn. This is not a philosophy you can apply from the first day. As I am saying, me myself, the first day I applied it, I was wrong in the way to make it. I need to practice to be fluent in it, like anything you learn in technology in general.
Okay. Do you have feedbacks on using LLM for writing unit tests?
LLM, good question also. Thanks. So myself, I'm not a big fan of coding with LLM, so already for myself the answer is done. No, otherwise I will give another answer is the goal of the unit test, as I'm saying, is not to validate the code by itself. As I said, this is 20% of the interest. The problem of the unit test is more to validate your design. And if you want to validate your design, you need to write your unit test yourself to play with your function to see if your design is nicely done. So if you try to delegate this test writing to the LLM, it will do the test for yourself, and you will not play with your function yourself, and not see that your design is broken, or less see. So myself, I has trained myself to write the test myself because this is what I want. I want to play with my code. This is my goal. So I don't see a point to automate it. I mean, probably a bit in the end. Let's say it's at the end of the product, if you want to enrich the test base when it's already in production and the code is frozen. But during the development phase, I think it's not a good idea from my point
Yeah,
of
and
view.
you still have to pass through the test to be sure that everything is written correctly, and you test what you want to test.
Yeah, and you are losing the checking of the semantic, which is, I mean, what is for me by feedback the big game of the methodology.
How does one start to apply unit testing on an existing CFD code written in Fortran?
Yeah, alors Fortran is not the simpler language to learn unit tests, so
But you can.
you can. There is some frameworks. So as I'm saying, so it depends on how your code is done. I mean, if there is global variables everywhere and it's a very old simulation, probably I will not say forgot, but it will be hard. So I will say if you have a Fortran code and you want to learn, it's probably because you are a numerical people. And in that case, you can probably try first in the Python code you are working on around, because in Python this is easier to learn. When you have learned, you can come back to your Fortran code and see, as I'm saying, in the leaf function, what you can do first on this one, and the rest of the software, it will be probably hard. Because it has not been designed to be unit tested. So then you have to accept at some point that an old code is very not done for unit test. This is the problem. This is a bit the problem of the methodology. If it's not think from the beginning, it's not so easy. Or you need a lot of expertise on unit test to get it running.
How do we make sure that the test is really helpful? I mean, the most problematic cases are edge cases, so how do we know that we tested again all of the possible edge cases?
So again, yeah, good question. So is your test a good test? I would say first, is your test readable? Which means that when it will fail in 6 months, do you will pass 1 day to understand it or 5 minutes? So this is already a good criteria. For the cases you choose to implement in the test itself, as I said, choose 1 or 2 corner cases which are representative of your function. It's enough, at least at the beginning. Then you enrich later when you have the bugs during the end development phase.
Would you prefer unit tests over compile time checks, strong typing, marker classes, etc.?
So for me, they go both together.
Yeah.
They go both together. So the good point also, if you want to make a refactoring, is that the unit tests are testing the API. Okay, so the first part of the program which will fail when you build for example, you refactor a class to change the type, the returning type of a function. The first part of the code which will be broken is the unit test normally, which make you you will understand quickly what is broken in the semantic. Either you fix the unit test because it's what should be done. Either by fixing unit test, you see that there is a problem in the semantic, but first in the unit test before applying it in the rest of the code. The unit tests are building well with the type checking, fine. Now you can apply it to the rest of the code, the changing, following the compiler errors. So for me, they go both together, and I strongly use both.
Is it okay to implement your own test with Python script on separate part of your software the old way? Implement a test separately for each function seems baroque for me. The print are already helpful. I think PyTest more of a bother, and it seems easy to tweak a test with PyTest to force it to give artificially the result you want. Yes, but you have to play the game in a nice way, of course.
Yeah, but the prints, yeah. The problem of the prints is that the print is not automatic. So yourself, for example, you have a program of, let's say 10,000 lines, debugging with only the prints. I mean, seeing the bugs with only the prints when you make, for example, a refactoring, you refactor, you will not print everything of your code. So yourself, you have written the code, so probably you know it well, but let's think about your summer student when it comes, or your new collaborators. They don't know everything in your code, so it will be very hard to debug. We will see during the school. I make an exercise about this to feel how it is to have or to not have the unit test. And this is an interesting exercise to make, and you directly see the difference in half an hour. So we will see this during the school with one of the things, with an example. And also with print, the problem is that in 3 years, or if your software live for 10 years, in 10 years you will have forgotten what should be print. So if a value 3 become a value 2, you will probably not notice.
Yeah, that's the problem of the print. You check by eye what's is supposed to be the result, but you don't want to read everything each time, of course.
Yeah, that's it. You don't want. The good point with the test, when I launched the test, it's this is what I was showing. I want something to be green or to be red. If it's red, I want to know what is broken. If it's green, fine. I don't want to read anything. I mean, my brain has to think about other stuff. What I should do next in my code, not each value which should be printed by it.
So I think that's it, because the other questions were already in the Q&A part. So yeah, thank you for the seminar. Good day to all. Okay, so I think we can end up here. So thank you, Sebastian, for this presentation. So I will do the editing tomorrow, and normally next week you should have the replay on YouTube for those who cannot attend this right now. So thank you again for coming. Next week we will talk about CPU architectures, so cache, vectorization, stuff like that. So if you are interested, so you can have a look in the schedule of the webinars. Yeah, thanks for coming, and see you next week. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.